Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Annie and Kate. Hi Annie, and welcome to our guest, Gemma Carey. Gemma is an author and a researcher at the University of New South Wales. She has written for The Guardian, Meanjin, Canberra Times, and she's also been on radio and NPR. And as a writer, her goal is to capture hard life experiences, grief, loss and trauma, and turn them into something beautiful. So welcome, Gemma, and probably the most important thing, what are we drinking?
Thank you for having me, and I'm drinking a gin cocktail.
Nice. What sort of gin do you have, Gemma?
I've got Poor Tom's, which is a Sydney gin.
No, that's a good gin. I like Poor Tom's. So I have a very tasty, I just took a sneaky sip of it, a Tasmanian Syrah. I didn't know Tasmania did Syrahs. This is an interesting moment. It's very tasty.
Oh, that's good. And I've got gin and tonic, Bombay Sapphire.
A good stalwart of a gin.
And mercifully, because I'm not in the office, I don't have to drink that last can of Gordon's gin and tonic that is still in the fridge.
It must have been there for about 4 weeks now, Kate.
Yeah. I was in yesterday and I saw it there and I was like, yeah, I don't want to drink that.
Well, look, it's in a can. It's not going to go off.
Precisely.
Go there. I'd totally go there.
You never know when you're going to need an emergency gin and tonic in the office. I think it should stay there for a while.
Actually, an emergency gin and tonic kit is a really good idea.
I feel like almost every gin and tonic is an emergency gin and tonic in my life, but anyway.
Well, it was this afternoon. We had drinks for some colleagues who were leaving us, and I was really glad to have a drink at 4 o'clock today.
There's no judging in 2020. It's what I keep saying to people when they disclose their like secret shames to me. I'm like, we don't judge in 2020. You do what you got to do to get through.
I think that's a really admirable attitude. Yeah.
It is. And can I get you to just ring me in the morning, Gemma, with that? Make sure that I don't feel so bad that I'm just wearing my stretchy pants for another day in a row.
I'm wearing a onesie right now.
Good work.
It's no judgment in 2020.
We need to make that a soundbite that we carry around on our phones with us, something.
Great.
Annie, do you want to go first with one of the questions?
I do. I was going to go with something very, sort of sensible and laudable, but I'm actually going to go with one of, and this is turning out to be, I think, one of the most interesting questions that we've asked to some of our previous podcast guests, which is, what is the one thing that you've done that you will never do again?
Oh, Jesus. Just one. Oh, I feel like you should have sent this to me in advance so I could mull over the multitude of options.
All right, you can give the top 3 if you'd like.
I might go with my top 3.
Okay.
I would not jump off a 25-foot bridge and break a rib.
Okay, there's a story we're going to ask a question about again later.
I would try not to find out my 70-year-old father was sleeping with a 28-year-old.
Okay.
And I would try not to leave a job at university in a giant blaze of glory.
Ooh, I think I want to follow up on that one most. What was the blaze of glory? What happened?
Oh, how public will this be? I will not name names and I will not name the university. I was accused of plagiarizing for a piece of work that I did before I actually came to the job at the university, so it couldn't have been plagiarized. And on my way out the door to another job, I made sure that a 30-page complaint detailing all of that went right up to the Vice-Chancellor. I gather it's still spoken about to this day.
That is a blaze of glory. I love it.
Oh yeah.
I have this suspicion, and by the way, we're speaking to 2 women who are very sort of well accredited women within universities in Australia, I had no idea how much, sort of nonsense goes on within that particular sector. It's like, I don't actually understand why there hasn't been some sort of reality TV show about it yet.
It would make a good one, right? I mean, you could certainly have quite a lot of sex scandals going on in your university reality TV show.
Well, there was a vice chancellor that's just been fired at another university interstate because of sexual harassment.
It's my alma mater. Yeah, Adelaide Uni. And the interesting thing about that actually is I never had him as a lecturer, but when I was an undergrad, everybody knew that you stayed away from him. He was a lecturer at the time. He rose a very long way with a lot of bad behaviour.
And he was at another university in another southern state and another southern state below that state. And the stories are the same everywhere. And it's no surprise to anybody. It's just now I think the universities are kind of having their own Me Too moment where this kind of thing does get taken seriously, which is much better. But that's a pretty legendary exit.
Mm-hmm.
His or mine?
Yours. His is just well deserved.
Yeah.
Right. So what's your question, Kate?
Well, I'm wondering if you could go back and tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?
That's one I've actually thought a lot about, and not to be blatantly kind of publicising my own work, but I think you both know that I had a memoir come out this week. And it's a memoir that tells a couple of different stories. One is about my mum dying young of cancer and me caring for her, and the other one is about taking a man to court for child sexual abuse when I was 17. So the thing, not to get too heavy on you, that I would go back and tell my younger self is to stay away from the man who sexually abused me as a child.
Good fucking advice right there.
Yeah. Solid advice.
Hey, and look, as without going into the details and the ins and the outs, I went through some childhood sexual abuse as well, and I don't know about you. So this is a follow-up question, I guess, in the broadest sense of, I was really young when it happened to me, so it sort of felt a bit like it wasn't really me that it happened to, because the time I grew up and decided how I wanted to be, the things that happened in the past, I sort of almost felt like a distant memory. So it never has impacted me in terms of, portraying myself or putting myself forward for who I wanted to be, or having confidence. How did it impact you?
I think I would have said exactly the same as you until my mother started to die. So I thought that I had dealt with it all and it was behind me and I'd gotten over it and I had a PhD and everything was great and had a beautiful middle class life and I owned a house and was married and all of that. Then my mum started to die and it brought it all back up again, and I realized actually I hadn't dealt with it fully at all, and then I went through this kind of process of sense making, and that turned into a whole book, in fact. So I'd like to say now that I'm over it, but I'm a little hesitant to even say that, given I would have said that for many years before I ended up writing a book about it. So,
and what led you to write the book?
I didn't mean to write a book. I just started writing about it and what was going on as my mum died, and it grew and grew, and then sort of became a book. And then writer friends of mine and my writer husband said, no, this is a book. This isn't just your catharsis. Then I pursued publication of it.
So cool.
It's been, I think, because you're both from university, it's like I think it opens up a really interesting tension, and one that's sort of exploded on me already a couple of times, which is, as academics and researchers, we're so often told that we can't be more than our research and we can't be more than our career, to have other interests, let alone to write in, you know, a dramatically different semi-creative memoirist field, and reveal things about ourselves. And you know, academics, I think institutionally, we're very, you know, keep it all inside. So I think, like, I've written memoir outside of this book in essays in The Guardian and different places, as was read out in the bio, which has caused friction with some older academics who felt really uncomfortable, saying, I don't really like having to read about things that have happened to you or your feelings. I'm like, well, you don't have to read it just because it's
You're
there.
not forcing them to read it. You're holding them down, forcing them to read it.
It's a choice. So I sort of, you know, it only happened this week, but I've had a little bit of a taste of it, and I wonder how it will be to kind of, I describe it as like, you know, be my whole self within the academy, within the institution, truly for the first time, and how that's going to go. But I also, you know, I'm speaking from a tenured position of safety, even amongst the destruction of our sector, where I can take risky steps like that. And I know that there's a lot of, you know, more precarious academics out there who can't right now.
Mm.
So what do you think it was about your mother passing away that started to precipitate that? Was it?
It was that my mother knew and didn't do anything.
Oh.
Right.
And we never talked about it. Yeah.
Right.
So the first half of the book is kind of my mother dying and me grappling with, do I ask, do I not ask? How do I deal with this? And also, how do I was her primary carer while she was dying. So how do I care for this person through very, very kind of very difficult death from cancer, while also holding this sort of betrayal with her? And then the second half of the book is sort of everything that happened after she died and all the sort of things that came to light about her life that made a lot more helped make sense of why she had done what she had done. I really just took you both like right into the.
No,
This is going wherever you want it to go. So I'm finding it fascinating.
Well, right, that's real life. It's not, you know, you can't artifice this. It's just, that's how it goes.
And it is kind of messy. Like, nobody's life is perfect, and everybody's got their own story. But you're luckily very articulate, and you can tell your stories in really nice ways, really interesting ways.
Thank you. I think as well, like I hope that there's, you know, an extra bit of, I don't know, power is not the right word, but something like that, about having successful women tell stories that are, you know, that they've been through trauma and it's been messy. And like, I talk a lot in the book about, like, you know, I've been a real fuck up at points in my life as well. Yet here I am, you know, I became a tenured associate professor at 32, you know, like, you can overcome it. Look, I overcame it. So I hope, I sort of always say that, like, I wrote the book that I probably needed to read when I was younger.
That's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah.
So if you, going back to, you know, sort of perhaps when you were in the thick of it and now you are where you are, what was it that helped you to sort of navigate out of that messy period into, you know, sort of a really successful career?
I think probably a lot like you, Annie, I just divorced myself from my earlier past, and just got on with it. And I think I also did a lot of things to sort of be like, I am doing this despite what happened. And it wasn't until a much later point that I was able to integrate those things and begin to also do things that aren't you know, they're not despite what happened, or to spite anyone, the person who abused me or my mother and her betrayal or anything, but it's actually just living for me.
Like, that's the thing that we all hope to do, you know, integrate all those parts of ourselves and live our lives, our own lives, you know, apart from everybody else. Well, what would you say to your younger self? Like, I mean, would you give a specific advice, or would you give more generic advice about the kind of people that you need to watch out for?
There's this book that came out just 2 weeks ago by Carmen I can't remember her last name, but it's called A Dream House. And she has this scene in it, a little section in it where she talks about, like, what if you could break through the kind of wall of time and go into your childhood bedroom and sit your childhood self down and say that this and this and this is going to happen and you need to not do these things. Like, would you listen to yourself? And like, I loved it when I read that, because I've thought that so much. Like, could I just break through the wall of time and go back and say, do not do these things? And she makes this point of kind of like, well, there were people around you at the time who told you not to do that. You had all your friends who told you not to do that, and you did it anyway. What makes you think that, you know, you're going to listen to some, you know, older version of yourself that's somehow broken through like space-time continuum? But we fantasize about such strange things. I think I would tell myself not just to stay away from that person, but I would also try and tell myself that you have value outside of the gaze of men, and you have value outside of, you know, whether somebody finds you sexually desirable or not, and pursue and value those parts of yourself, because that's part of growing up in a patriarchy, right? Is we kind of get assumed into, valuing things.
We don't even realize it, and it's only when you're sort of approaching 40 that you look back and you realize how patriarchy has infiltrated every part of your life. You know, so essentially it might not even be possible to see it from the perspective of a young person.
I couldn't agree more. And I think before, you know, as we're obviously thinking about how conversation may spark conversation once it gets shared, we are not saying all men. We are saying that, you know, the construct of society that we live in forces women to think and act and respond in ways that make sense to men. It's not that we want to do it. It's not that it's that men want us to do it. It's just, it is what it is. And it's a fascinating construct when you start to question it more. Whether it's, so I remember when I first started to stop wearing dresses and skirts to the office, and I started wearing, more kind of like slacks, trousers, and a pair of flip-flops. And the amount of comments I got,
we call them thongs, Annie.
They're flip-flops. I will never call them thongs.
So you were ahead of your time if you're doing that for 2020.
Oh, I really was. I've been doing it since 2011, I think it was. I'm just really lazy. I just don't, and also I hate socks. I think socks are the devil's work. My feet need to be free. They just need to be free and breathing. Anyway, that's very much beside the point.
My husband has just snuck in and brought me some chips.
Oh, are they made with your incredible air fryer? Kate?
Yes, made with the air fryer. Sorry.
We'll talk about
apparently what he was trying to get in and give me.
Well, look, that's a very good gift. The gift of air fried chips. Good work, Boyd. The thing is, though, that we're told to look and wear clothes or look a certain way in the office. And when I started to turn up wearing flip-flops, comfortable trousers or dresses, and not looking like I was about to turn up in a Vogue shoot, I was like, oh, what are you wearing that for? Because I want to. Or where's your proper shoes? These are actually, compared to, not wearing anything on my feet at all, they're still shoes. They may still be flip-flops, which possibly some people may not consider office wear. I do. It's just, I don't know, I find it fascinating that we're conditioned over all of those years to be told that we need to look a certain way and act a certain way. And the moment that we start to kind of take it back for ourselves, the more we realize that actually it was always there for us and we should have done it probably long ago.
I can remember when I stopped wearing dresses. It was 1999. And I thought, I'll just wear jeans until someone tells me to stop. No one's ever told me to stop, so I'm still wearing jeans to work.
It wasn't 2000, it was 2001. I remember now. I went on holiday. I did my 6 or 7 months around the world with my best friend. We did New Year in the Galapagos Islands, came back. It would have been March or April of 2000. and my marketing director looked at me 2 weeks before I was meant to come back. I'm still in a pair of flip-flops and a summery dress and a big jumper because it's March in England. And she's like, Annie, it's the office. You're coming back next week. I expect you to look the part. I went, do you want me to come back or do you want me to wear good clothes? And she went, good point. You can just come back, wear what you like. So I did.
Look the part. What is the part?
No, it's a good point though, right? Because it's a construct that makes no sense. And I rocked up that first next week or whatever it was, the first week I went back, wearing flip-flops and a kind of a normal skirt and a top, and literally no one batted an eyelid. So, it requires a few people to perhaps be a little bit unusual or difficult or buck the rules. So I guess, question for you, Gemma, what are some of the ways that you've tried to buck the system and change the rules so that it makes a difference for others coming behind you?
I think I'm a little bit the opposite of both of you in that I do wear dresses to work still. But the challenge that I've often had as a woman in academia and in, with a kind of public, needing to kind of perform publicly, is I get told a lot, make your voice deeper, make yourself bigger. And I don't know if you can tell on camera, I am a small person.
How do you make yourself bigger?
And so I can't. Yeah, like how do I take up more space? Well, I kind of physically can't. This is just my max. This is as much as I have. And I even got to the point of nearly taking voice coaching to lower my voice. And I was like, you know what? And I think I was probably 30 at the time. And I was thinking, I can be small and squeaky and fucking kick ass, and everyone's just going to have to deal with that. And I cannot change the body I was born into to fit into society's expectations. You're just going to have to accept that a small squeaky person can also be intelligent. The funniest moment I ever had about that was I got off stage giving a keynote once, and this man came up to me and he said, I've read all of your work and I expected you to be bigger.
What? They're obviously big ideas, really big ideas.
Yeah, I write like a big person. Like, what the fuck even is that? So,
but that's kind of the stuff that we fight against. Is this thing of the default human is male, the default person has a lower tone of voice. Like think about Margaret Thatcher. She deliberately dropped her voice so that she would sound more authoritative. And we need to carve out our own space where we don't compromise on things like, this is just what my voice sounds like. You just have to live with it. I think that's very healthy for us. Bad for men who don't like our voices. They don't like that we've got higher voices. Well, tough luck, because that's how we talk.
Yeah.
About all of that, I'm not entirely sure that's. Perhaps it's not true on a macro level. When you include the entirety of anyone's lives, that I can't imagine that most guys would sit there and go, I don't like the sound of a woman's voice. That doesn't sound right, because their mum has a woman's voice, their grandmother, their sisters, their daughters. It's the context of it's in an authoritative environment. Yeah.
I don't like that you were on stage, holding authority, and yet, you don't have you don't have what I expect, what I've been taught by society to expect.
You're not wearing a masculine style suit, and you're not presenting, but why should we? We're ourselves. I think it's very healthy.
Thank you. So that's probably something that I try to pass on to. I have a lot of early career researcher mentors and everything, and I had, one thing I will never ever say to them is like, don't change yourself, and don't change your femininity or how you want to present in the world for what you think will give you authority. Your ideas will prevail, over and above your appearance, and that's not what any of this should be about.
And that's how it should be. That's our ideas should stand or fall on their own merits. That's the only merit there is.
But it is a bit of a running joke whenever I give a keynote that one of my mates says, "I thought you'd be bigger."
I'm also one would say vertically challenged, Gemma. So
we call you petite.
I'm really quite small. In UK money, I'm 5'1". I don't know what that is in meters and centimeters, but it's not very much. And I remember back in the UK, my old boss, my last boss in the UK he's 6'7", I think. So we were quite the pair when we were walking around going to meetings, because 6'7" and 5'1" is quite a thing. And he would always say to me, "You're the smartest person in the room. Anybody who's asking a question, I'm going to defer it to you because you have all of the answers and I don't." And in the UK, we'd be fine. But when we went to Spain, it'd be very different because it's quite a masculine oriented kind of construct, and particularly in corporate. So we would deliberately do a routine of, when the questions got asked, they would be asked to Simon. And then Simon would literally not say a word and just look at me. And then I would answer the question. And then we would try and see how long it would take before the room realized that they needed to ask me the questions versus asking him. And it took a long time. So, the scenarios that you're describing don't just exist in university land, they exist in far too many places, sadly.
I don't doubt it. I think one of the great gifts when I walk outside of university, where in university everyone is a doctor and everyone isn't a professor and blah blah blah. But I work a lot with government, and having the title from the university, at least, not always, but sometimes, can really help with that authority challenge of being, and I also look a fair bit younger than I am, so that can really help, I think, push back against that, at least in those contexts.
So when you look for the future for yourself and for the things that you're trying to champion for, what does the future look like for you, Gemma?
I feel like that was, we've all got a different question in 2020. Sorry, different answer to that question in 2020. I think, my answer now is, how do I keep creating pathways, and how do I keep wonderful, talented young academics and researchers in the system? So my focus has shifted a little bit away from where before I was a bit more like, let's challenge the structures of institutions, to more of a mother hen thing of like, how do I keep you all surviving in this? Which it's a bit unfortunate, because I think, one of the things, and not just in universities, we've seen it everywhere, but the first thing that goes out the window when we have a budget crisis, like what COVID recession has brought on, is equity goes out the window. Mm-hmm. So, part of the fight is to not let the equity measures of 20 years that we've fought for get washed out the drain in the first budget cut. But also the split of energy has shifted from like I can put a fair bit of attention on trying to change that system, to how do I just keep 15, 20 ECRs from falling out of the system, because they're brilliant, and the world can't afford to lose them from research either.
And I think that's a sort of an interesting angle, because it's kind of separate from the institutional infrastructure to support diversity. It's actually what's happening in their homes now. So if they have children, then if they're female, all of the childcare is probably mostly falling on them, and the homeschooling and all of that stuff is inequitably falling on the women, and that's going to be a real problem for their research outputs and stuff. And trying to find a way to navigate that, because you can't just solve that very easily, because it's a COVID related problem.
Someone on Twitter said, You know, if I could do anything, you know, I'd love to just give all of my staff a housekeeper. And that's how I feel too. Like you're probably both experiencing it too. And I'm sure people in lots and lots of industries are, where you're responsible for a cohort of people as their kind of their manager. And you want to take away all the stress and distress about their daily lives and their careers in this situation. But you're really, really limited in what you can actually do. I would love to give them all a housekeeper. I'd love someone to give to me a housekeeper to get through this. But we can't do that. And so it's been a kind of, yeah. And that's, you know, I don't know how much you want to focus in on just the academic environment, but, you know, I think a really serious question that I'm asking myself, and I wonder if other academics are asking themselves, is what is it morally responsible at this point to take on PhD students who want an academic career if we're just kind of, you know, going to let them fall off a cliff? And I don't have an answer to that, but that's something that I've been grappling with over maybe the last sort of 3 or 4 months. We've really seen the very targeted ideological attack on the sector is, you know, do I hang on to the ones that I've got under my wings at the moment and I think I can look after them? And yeah, what do we do from here?
Well, you know, higher education is very much under attack at the moment, and I think we as a society are going to need to ask some really hard questions about whether or not we really value the future and education's role in innovation or not. As a country, you know, as a country, we've gotten by because we're lucky, and I think we're at risk of destroying a whole higher education sector. The whole university sector will be reshaped, and it won't be what we knew it to be. And we run the risk of not having the disinterested research that turns up a gem. All of those gems that we value were typically come from just someone's passion. They weren't funded for it, you know, they've just got a job that gives them lab space to do what they're interested in, and they can do it. And I think we run the risk of killing that off and trying to make job machines.
And look, I'm part of that process right now, right? Where I've had to say to my research team, I need you to hate this word. This is the 2020 word. I need you to pivot to income generation. Like I promise we'll get back to ideas and to, you know, writing papers and all of that beautiful, I call it creative work in academia. But right now I need to make sure all of you stay employed. And it kind of breaks my heart a bit to have to do that. But here we are.
Yeah, well, 2020 was not what any of us expected.
No.
Nope, not at all. Now, one of my final questions for you, Gemma, is kind of, how did you get into academia in the first place?
I was born into it. It's not a very interesting answer. I'm the child of academics, but I am the black sheep. So my father is a mathematical, pure mathematician and physicist. My mother was an economist, and my sister is a roboticist. So I'm the social science black sheep. But
so you have rebelled. It's good to see.
In my own little way, but only because like all of those genes that involve numbers, they just skipped me completely. So yes, that's what brought me to academia. And then what took me to writing, I think a little bit outside of academia, is I started to get a little bit bored of being an academic and thought I needed to grow a second career at the same time, which was again pre-COVID, where such things were a luxury we could pursue.
And how did you publish your first book? How did that happen?
It's really interesting, right? Like, and people also ask, how long did it take you to write your book? And I say it took me 20 years and 20 days. I actually wrote my book very, very quickly. Not a revision, but wrote the book very quickly. And all right, are you ready for the true, honest story of how it happened? It's quite funny.
Yeah, totally.
was kicking around. I had his manuscript and I put it away for a while because, you know, it's a memoir. There's a lot of personal stuff in it. And I was like, do I really want to release this into the world and my colleagues and everything? And I had a really devastating second trimester miscarriage. And I was absolutely off my face on painkillers afterwards. And I just wrote to a literary agent and went, like, and my email to her, I can't believe she read the book because it was so full of typos. I was so high on painkillers. But she read the book and she was like, this is fucking phenomenal. And within 2 weeks, it went into a bidding war between 5 of the biggest publishers in the world. So it just went from like 0 to insanity really, really quickly. Yeah. Yeah. So probably maybe a bit of an unexpected thing, but a friend of mine said to me, you know, I think that was your subconscious leading you down the right path.
Yeah. But that's how the first book goes. It takes 20 years and then suddenly it goes off.
Yeah.
But hey, painkillers. How good are painkillers?
Don't knock them, especially in 2020. So sad, we don't judge in 2020.
So, Gemma, when does the book come out?
It came out this week.
This week?
Yeah.
We'll put a link to it. We'll put a link to it in the show notes.
Don't me that. Please tell us what it's called.
It's called No Matter Our Wreckage, and it's published by Allen and Unwin.
Awesome.
We will put a link in the bottom of the show notes. Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. And thanks, Annie.
No worries. I'm looking forward to reading the book, Gemma.
Oh, thank you.
On my to-be read list.
I could stay all evening and talk to you both. Really? We're done already?
We really enjoyed having you on. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Please don't forget to like us and leave a good review because that would be nice. And we'll be back shortly. Thank you.